Right, so we know that Cabinet is meeting this evening. We expect to hear in the next day or so if they are in favour of a state of disaster being declared over the power crisis. While those in support of this plan, including the ANC and a number of energy analysts, say it will allow for more speed in power procurement and more money to do the work being released, those who are more hesitant point to the corruption and also the sweeping powers that the previous COVID-related state of disaster gave government. One concern is the Powership's plan. Now, Powerships essentially are floating power stations commonly used when a country has a real power emergency. So, for example, after a civil war where the entire grid has gone down. So this concerns that deal, which, of course, that deal was first mooted around 2021, whether that's going to resurface. There was a 20-year deal put on the table with Turkish company Karpowerships. But following an outcry, that deal stalled. Or did it? Well, OUTA, the organisation undoing tax abuse, has been locking horns with Nersa, the energy regulator. They're in court to get a full record of the licences that have been issued by Nersa to Karpowership. And I'm joined now by OUTA Executive Director, Advocate Stefanie Fick. Stefanie, thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to get more details on your court action in a moment, but what actually happened to the Karpowership deal? Because it was so close. Then there was an outcry over the 20-year term, which was a heck of a long time, bearing in mind that this is mostly used in emergencies. Is this deal actually dead in the water or still afloat?
It's dead in the water. I think it would be extremely difficult for them to push through this 20-year deal that's going to cost South Africa an enormous amount of money. But let's start by, where this whole process started is that they initially got the environmental authorization. So for these ships to be in our harbours, they have to show that environmentally it's not going to be detrimental to the environment, etc., etc. And initially they got the environmental authorization. They tried to actually push it through with COVID regulations and so forth. So that was then afterwards withdrawn. And they then appealed, and the minister said, no, there's no way. But she left open a door that they can reapply. And that's the process that is currently happening. In other words, they still need to get environmental authorizations for this deal to go anywhere. And that's one of the reasons why we took on Nersa, because Nersa gave them distribution licenses without Karpowership having environmental authorization, clarity on the finances, etc., etc. That's one. Two, whether Nersa really took into consideration what this is going to cost the country, the length of the contract, and the fact that, I hope that there's no one out there that think that Karpowership is going to really, solve the electricity crisis. They signed the deal for 1.2 megawatts of power. That is maybe a stage of electricity. So if we are in stage 6, Karpowership may reduce that to stage 5. It's not a plug and play. It's not going to be, today we say, yes, we have a problem, and then tomorrow, all of a sudden, there's going to be enough electricity. And then thirdly, why 20 years? The crisis, our own minister has said, hopefully this crisis will be resolved after 3 years. So why do we need a 20-year deal? Doesn't make sense. And all of this, despite all of this, Nersa still gave them a distribution license.
Tell me, if it's dead in the water, why you are still in court and what do you want?
So we took Nersa's decision on review. We are saying that the facts that they had before them does not correlate with the decision that they made. And in review applications, you are obviously allowed to see the record. In other words, what are the facts that Nersa took into account when they made this decision? And it's this record that in our process they refused to give us. We got a heavily redacted record. You can't understand a word of it. And now, unfortunately, as part of a let's call it an interlocutory application, we have to go back to court before we can argue the merits of this case, saying to court, but Nersa refuses to give us the record. Please compel them to give us the record. I think that, this lack of transparency speaks to, but is there, a snake in the grass? Is there something wrong with, the finances and the interests of civil society. Because at the end of the day, for us, it's about, is the decision Nersa made in the best interest of South Africa?
All right, so you want to get to the bottom of that deal, even though that deal is now off the table. Some energy analysts I've spoken to would be potentially in favour of a Powership deal over a shorter period of time, say 2 years, to create that cushion to allow Eskom to take entire power stations offline for a while and fix them properly. Do you think that a reframed deal could work in the way that these Powerships are meant to be used for a short period of time, a year, 2 years, to actually create the space we need to get our fleet working again?
I think the answer is no. We don't believe that a deal with Karpowership is at all viable. I think it's really going to be too expensive for South Africa. But let's give them the benefit of the doubt for one moment. Is we would like to see the finances for 2 to 3 years, because my logic tells me that 2 to 3 years is not going to be profitable for them. That's why we're talking about 20 years, so that it is more profitable. And we can look at international cases where, you know, they've parked in the base of countries, and then after a while the countries do not need them anymore, but they're still stuck and they still need to pay. The minister himself said that if you are talking about a 5-year deal or even a 10-year deal, the price per kilowatt hour is probably going to double, and that speaks to the profitability of it.
Right.
I think, without being an expert, and I'm really not really an energy expert, and I think to a large degree a lot of the energy experts may differ a little bit as to how Eskom should solve all their problems. The problem is we do not have enough electricity. We do not have, for example, an integrated energy plan to establish how much energy we need and how we're going to solve it. But I think a short-term sort of solution is for the minister to make available more electricity, get electricity from other sources, and that I think that is a less expensive exercise than trying to get Karpowership here to give us electricity, which, like I said, one stage.
Yeah. I've got to ask you a final quick question, because we know that the Cabinet is probably mulling whether to push for the state of disaster. Do you think it's a good idea? Or do you, I'm in the realm of conspiracy theories here. Could it be, if there is a state of disaster declared, could it be used to sort of bring a Karpowership type deal back onto the table?
I think the answer has to be yes, because historically, what happened when we were struggling with COVID, when there was a lockdown, the PPE corruption, just the sheer in your face that despite the difficultness that normal South Africans are going through, lives that were lost, PPE corruption happened. So I think it's a normal defense to say, but a state of disaster declaration is going to open the door for all kinds of shenanigans, and we do believe that they may try and push through Karpower, because part of declaring it a state of disaster is to make certain things a little bit easier. I think they're going to have an uphill battle, because I think this time civil society's eyes are open and we know what can happen when there's a state of disaster. But on the other hand, we are living in a state of disaster. But whether a declaration is the right move, don't think so, because I don't think government has shown that they are able to act in the best interest of South Africa.
All right. Well, thank you very much for chatting to us. Our Executive Director, Advocate Stefanie Fek there.